Hams, when you asked me such an important and fundamental question about, I suppose, through my experience or witnessing perception of pain, I answered it on such a flippant and surface level. And please, anybody listening, forgive that. It's just that, and I'm sure we all know this pain is so personal and so intimate. There are so many different levels of it. And just from the outside, even one person's story of something that felt like such a deep suffering may not be so then relatable to another that hasn't gone through that experience or have those attachments or connections or identifications with that. I was guided by such an incredible practitioner who shared a story with me early on. And this person explained to me how they had their intention for being of great service and was an incredible student with all sincerity and learned everything possible with helping with counseling. And they specialized with helping bereaved parents, put on that suit, showed up with all professionalism, working through everything prescribed, no doubt was of great service, and that was all very useful, well and good. But only when they themselves went through that experience did they begin to truly know. And that's the thing, because there are so many different levels to things. There are incredible and practical tools that can help offer such steadiness and comfort and show where at times we can be really caught in a certain perspective, or we can literally be caught in certain patterning that is unknowingly creating pain, and the smallest refined subtle shifts can help alleviate a lot of that. But still, it's a process of acclimatizing. And with time, for all of us needing to make peace with impermanence. But in saying that, I was, given, it sounds like such a silly experience when I will say what happened with me, but it just gave me a tiny, smallest glimmer in that whilst I was working with a most beloved student, all students beloved, but most, deep soul friend. And they were moving through or being confronted with the death experience. And slowly an experience of everything disintegrating and losing functions of mobility, but also sense perceptions, losing vision. And I was teaching and very beautiful meditations and accessing or what is permanent, and experiences of expanding perception. So not having to be so caught with the pain of losing physical vision and sight. Yet at the same time, whilst I was teaching, my back tooth crumbled. And I was so rudely and acutely in fear that a small part was disintegrating and crumbling. So when you're actually in an experience where things are changing substantially, it is very hard to access being at peace and being able to truly acclimatize to this deep clinging to our existence, this clinging to life, and all the things we have attached to and identified with, all of that, be able to actually make peace with letting all of that go. And that is the real suffering. It's that holding on. Yet so too, I mean, it's so wired in. You see it when you walk towards an insect. I mean, hopefully you have trained in ahimsa, totally no harm, and the insects will come straight to you with friendship. But if you had not, you'll see how it just scurries. It's like in everything of existence. There's a, they've even seen with leaves, if you approach it with a different intention, it quivers. But that's the whole of this, all of it. So there are so many levels to it. And you'll see when, I've even felt with myself, say, sore shoulder, get so caught up with the sore shoulder. And then you'll ask, well, ask someone, oh gosh, this has really triggered a fear of death. No, I'm not scared of death. No, I'm at peace with death. But yet that sore shoulder has really triggered fundamentally this impermanence, the shifting, and also identification. But I mean, I need this shoulder to go and play. I need this shoulder to pick up my child, to be independent. Yeah. Or, we have experiences of also what we kind of feel and term what is dignified. So I've lost control of my bowels. This is such a great humiliation. This is so undignified. It's just the loss of bowels. And it's not, I mean, yes, it's great inconvenience, but it's also triggered all these other deep, deep levels of concepts of dignity and humiliation and loss of everything we've identified with ourselves, independent. Oh, I'm such a lady. And such levels of pain and sufferings. And then there's also all the things that happen just not on an outer thing that we can try and speak of, but I mean, what about all the inner mental stuff caught up with different thinking patterns, or literally caught in a prison of rumination, and how to get out of that, or things just going high and low, and then deep, deep, deep chasms in the being, having to crawl through a dark night of the soul. I mean, these are such levels of pain and sufferings. So what can we do? These levels and sufferings and sheaths, when you were speaking of coherence and how do we cultivate coherence and how in essence, can we try to reharmonize, rebalance, reestablish ease, or even when going through those huge, huge experiences of the greatest of loss of loved ones or loss of our limbs and perceptions, sense perceptions, how can we acclimatize to that? And no, there's these words of staying positive and going into acceptance, but sometimes it's just so many nonsensical things we have to bear. And how can you allow yourself to be better supported and steadied and very real through those experiences, but so too the grace and space to alleviate the patterns that unknowingly have exasperated the intensity of that pain. So, with focusing just on one and in the most outer, overt, manifestation of that, say with structure, our own physical structure, how can we set it up that it literally is more balanced? And please don't be perturbed if you've been born with a structure that is uniquely asymmetrical, because it's not about creating a picture perfect patterning. This is about establishing a comfortable harmony with whatever you've got. And so too, loving what you have to play with or work with in this existence, in this lifetime. So, and how to work on just physically putting in, where we can, a bit more comfort of balance and steadiness to best support, from a physical point, the other systems. So I heard the story, but I must verify the science behind this. But just, it's kind of, I thought, well, how beautiful, how many of our inner experiences, they are reflected all around us. And this one was just a story of grandfather clocks, and how if you put grandfather clocks together, I suppose, and they begin to tune into a similar rhythm, and then they eventually sync. And it's this law of this biorhythms, and it's a mathematical equation that has been put to this, but whether that is pure fantasy or not, the point is, if we can better clarify this structure, that it feels more balanced and harmonized, and that will alleviate compromise to our main branches of nerves, the neural plexuses along the spine. And in yoga, they talk about a much more subtle body. So although it can be in similar locations to the branches of nerves or the neural plexus along the spine, it's even more subtle than that. And we can allow them to be more expanded and open and comfortable, not pinched and compromised and acutely painful. It goes a long way to creating more comfort in this physical body and dissipating physical pain signals, because if we have a pinched nerve, we are unknowingly pinching ourselves. And I know that's easier said than done, because, man, I've done it to myself on numerous occasions. My personality is way too gung-ho, and it's a huge part of my practice, is learning to really just calm down and cool down. So, and then the knock-on and wonderful tick-tocking effect that has on the organs, the glands, the electrical and the chemical signals, but also the flow of energy, and what that does with the balancing of mind. And I mean, just even mind is not the brain, but say if we just talked about processing of a brain, the left and right brain hemispheres, when we can access both, we have far greater perception, but also we can keep on expanding and unfurling our own potential in this life, hopefully to be of better service and better understanding. And all these different experiences that we move through, there is comfort in what masters have said, is that, or enlightened, and say not masters, that's the wrong word, but enlightened, liberated, more liberated beings, is that in this existence there will be many experiences, and when we move through those experiences, so much is learned and accessed and more realized. And all these experiences, they're not there to, they're not intended to be there for us to suffer or to have to bear all these hardships. They're essentially, as we move through them, we become more free and liberated. But knowingly, it is hard to really say that when you do witness a loved one going through such pain, or yourself going through it. And for all of us, when we do move through and confront that death process, hopefully we can learn as we go along how to acclimatize, how to make more peace with impermanence, how to clear up all our false identifications that, and in a good way, that we are not only this or that, or as wonderful as it is to have these limbs, there's so much more to me than this hand. There's so much more than this, well, I mean, admittedly, very quirky personality. Oh, I love the role of being a mother. I love, and it's hard not to be identified with being mother, teacher, wife, but those are just roles and duties that I'm wholeheartedly showing up for, but sometimes those will also be stripped away, or I will, well, in passing, all of that goes. And how can I acclimatize with that? But still, all the while in this existence, being constructive, creative, finding simple solutions that when the huge, overwhelming, and painful experiences are there, there can be a quietude and a peace and a steadiness that can cultivate better ease, neutrality, and clarity that the experiences aren't such a weighted and hard bearing, and that there is still access to unconditional love, grace, and there's still this access to livingness here in this existence, moving through these experiences. And that even through the hardest of sufferings, there can be reprieve, and one can still keep on expanding and hopefully for all of us the lights of realization and true liberation, and to know reality, the whole of it, not just partial experiences, partial stories, partial truths. Be lovely to know all of it. And all of it is beautiful. Thank you.